If your daughter's knowledge could make the soil yield more, would you let her learn or forbid her to know? The school bell struck 8 times across the morning stillness, each chime sharp as winter air. Sarah Morrow set her chalk in the tray and turned from the blackboard where she'd written the day's lesson, agriculture and arithmetic, the science of soil. The empty benches stared back at her like accusation. Yesterday, 17 children had filled. Today, only the dust motes danced in the clear March sunlight.
You're trying to
slanting
cheat me,
through the
mister.
windows.
That's
She
not what
touched
we
the
agreed
leather-bound
on.
ledger on her desk, running her finger along the spine where she'd recorded every attendance mark for 3 years. The door creaked open. Ezra Whitman, the school board chairman, stepped inside without removing his hat. His boots left dark prints on the swept floor. Miss Morrow. He didn't offer a greeting. The parents have spoken. Sarah kept her hand on the ledger. About what, Mr. Whitman? Your methods? Teaching the girls the same sums as the boys? Talking about soil composition like it's gospel? He pulled a folded paper from his vest pocket. This is your notice. She lifted the ledger, feeling its familiar weight. Inside lay 3 years of careful records, not just attendance, but notes on each child's progress, their struggles with letters, their questions about the world beyond Millbrook Township. The children were learning. The children were learning things that ain't their place to know. Whitman set the paper on her desk. You got till Friday to clear out. Sarah opened the ledger to today's date, the 15th of March, 1890. She dipped her pen and wrote carefully beside each name. Absent, parental decision. 17 marks of surrender. Whitman waited, his breathing heavy in the quiet room. Outside, a crow cawed from the schoolyard oak. The stage runs Tuesday and Friday, he said finally. Be on one of them. After he left, Sarah sat among the empty benches. The ledger lay open in her lap, showing yesterday's lesson notes in her careful script. She'd been teaching the older girls about crop rotation, explaining how different plants restore different minerals to soil. Mary Fletcher had asked why farmers don't learn such things in school. Because they're farmers, not scholars, Sarah had answered. But farmers who understand their soil grow better crops. Now she understood her mistake. She'd forgotten the first rule of frontier teaching. Knowledge must know its place. The bell tower shadow crept across her desk as the sun climbed higher. 9 o'clock came and went without children's voices. Sarah closed the ledger and locked it in her desk drawer. Through the window, she could see the market square beginning to fill with Tuesday wagons, farmers bringing eggs and early vegetables, their wives carrying baskets of preserves and fresh bread. She'd planned to take the children there this afternoon to teach them about commerce and fair weights. The market scale stood in the center of the square, its brass plates gleaming in the morning light. Now it would serve only the merchants and their carefully balanced profits. The market square buzzed with Tuesday commerce when Sarah stepped outside at noon. She carried the ledger under her arm not because she needed it, but because holding it felt like carrying a piece of her purpose. The scale stood at the square's heart, surrounded by wagons and tables heavy with goods. Mrs. Henley sold eggs from a basket lined with blue gingham. Sarah approached her table, needing butter for the boarding house where she took her meals. 2 dozen eggs, please. Mrs. Henley's hands stilled over the basket. Sarah. She glanced toward the other merchants, then back. I heard about the school. News travels fast in a small town. Ezra Whitman's wife was here an hour ago. Said you've been filling the children's heads with ideas above their station. Mrs. Henley counted out 24 eggs, wrapping each in newspaper scraps. Said you taught Mary Fletcher to question her father's farming methods. Sarah handed over 30 cents. I taught her that healthy soil grows healthy crops. Same thing, according to some. Mrs. Henley dropped the coins into her apron pocket without meeting Sarah's eyes. Folks are saying you forgot your place. The market scale caught Sarah's attention. Jonas Polk, who ran the grain warehouse, stood beside it with a customer, Mrs. Davidson, whose husband worked the quarter section north of town. She held a sack of flour while Polk adjusted the brass weights. 20 pounds, as ordered, Polk announced. But Sarah could see from where she stood that the sack didn't balance proper against the 20-pound weight. The scale tilted slightly toward Polk's side, meaning the customer was getting less than promised. Mrs. Davidson either couldn't see the deception or didn't understand scales well enough to protest. "Excuse me." Sarah approached the scale. "Mrs. Davidson, that flower's running light." Polk's face darkened. "Miss Morrow, this ain't school business. It's arithmetic business." Sarah set down her egg basket and pointed to the scale's brass arm. "See how it tips? You're short at least 2 pounds." Mrs. Davidson squinted at the scale, then at Sarah. "Is that right?" "It's right." Sarah touched the brass plate gently, demonstrating how it should balance. A fair weight sits level. Polk's jaw worked like he was chewing tough meat. "The scale's been certified by the territorial inspector. The scale's fine. It's the measuring that's crooked." Sarah looked directly at him. "Add 2 pounds or charge for 18. A small crowd had gathered other customers, farmers, wives with market baskets. They watched the scale like it might reveal some fundamental truth about commerce and fairness. Polk reached under his counter and added flour to the sack until the brass plates balanced true. Satisfied? Mrs. Davidson should be the one satisfied. Sarah picked up her egg basket. She's the one paying. As she walked away, she heard whispers following her path. The ledger under her arm felt heavier now, weighted with more than children's names and attendance marks. She'd just taught a lesson in public, with half the town watching. At the boarding house, she set the eggs on the kitchen table and opened the ledger to a fresh page. She wrote, "The 15th of March. Market lesson. Audience. Approx. 20. Adults. Subject. Fair weights and honest commerce. Reception. Mixed." Mrs. Carmichael, who ran the boarding house, peered over her shoulder. "Writing in that book again? Keeping records." "Records of what?" Sarah closed the ledger. "Education." The afternoon bell struck 3 times from the empty schoolhouse. Through the boarding house window, she could see the market beginning to thin as farmers loaded their wagons for the journey home. The scale stood unattended now, its brass plates catching the slanted light. Tomorrow there would be no children to teach about honest weights and fair measures. But today, at least, Mrs. Davidson had received her full 20 pounds of flour. Sarah sat in the boarding house parlor that evening, the ledger open on her lap. By lamplight, she wrote carefully, "Teaching does not require a schoolhouse. Knowledge seeks its own paths." Through the lace curtains, she could see Main Street settling into dusk quiet. Most of the market wagons had departed, but a few stragglers remained, including one she didn't recognize, a black freight wagon with canvas sides pulled by 2 sturdy mules. The driver sat on his bench, unhurried, as if waiting for something. Mrs. Carmichael brought tea on a painted tray. "You planning to stay on after Friday?" "I haven't decided. Might be wise to consider your options." The older woman poured from a china pot that had travelled west in some long-ago wagon. "Whitman's got influence. Cross him, and other towns hear about it." Sarah touched the ledger's worn cover. Inside lay 3 years of careful observations, not just about children's learning, but about the community itself. How Mrs. Fletcher always sent Mary to school with extra biscuits for the younger children. How Tom Bradley struggled with reading but could solve mathematical problems in his head faster than she could work them on paper. How the older boys helped the younger ones with their coats and books without being asked. "I used to think teaching was about lessons," Sarah said. "Reading, writing, arithmetic. But it's really about showing people they're capable of more than they believed." Mrs. Carmichael settled into a rocking chair. "And that's why they drove you out. That's why they tried to." Through the window, the strange wagon's driver climbed down from his bench. Even in the dim streetlight, Sarah could see he moved with purpose, not the tired shuffle of a man ending a long day, but the deliberate stride of someone beginning important work. He walked toward the boarding house. Sarah closed the ledger and held it against her chest, feeling its weight settle against her heart like a promise. Tomorrow might bring uncertainty, but tonight she knew something with perfect clarity. Teaching had nothing to do with buildings or permission. It lived wherever someone was willing to learn and someone else was brave enough to share what they knew. The knock came soft but firm at the front door. "Mrs. Carmichael answered the door with the caution of a woman who'd seen too many strangers arrive after dark with trouble in their pockets. Sarah remained in the parlor, but she could hear every word through the thin walls. "Evening, ma'am. I'm looking for Miss Sarah Morrow." The voice was unfamiliar, deep, with an accent she couldn't place. Not Southern, not Eastern. Something else entirely. "Might I ask your business with her?" "Educational business." Sarah rose and walked to the hallway. The man stood on the porch, hat in hand, travel dust on his dark coat despite the evening's stillness. He was perhaps 40, with grey threading his brown beard and eyes that seemed to catalogue everything they saw. "I'm Sarah Morrow, Nathan Cole." He didn't offer his hand, but inclined his head respectfully. "I represent the Dakota Territorial Education Commission." Mrs. Carmichael stepped back, gesturing him inside. "Please, come in." In the parlor's lamplight, Sarah could see Cole more clearly. His clothes were well made, but practical, a working man's interpretation of respectability. He carried a leather satchel that bore the wear of constant travel. "Miss Morrow, I've come about your situation here in Millbrook." "My situation?" Cole opened his satchel and withdrew a thick folder. "We've been watching your work for some time. Your students' territorial examination scores have been exceptional, particularly in mathematics and natural sciences." Sarah gripped the ledger tighter. "Who's we?" "The Commission. We're tasked with evaluating educational practices across the territory. Your methods have drawn attention, apparently the wrong kind of attention." Sarah sat back down, suddenly tired. "The school board dismissed me this morning." "I know." Cole opened the folder and withdrew several papers. "I also know why. You've been teaching integrated curricula, boys and girls receiving identical instruction in mathematics and scientific reasoning. Parents object to daughters learning what they consider masculine subjects. They object to anyone thinking for themselves." Cole smiled, the first warm expression she'd seen from him. "Precisely why the commission sent me." He spread the papers across Mrs. Carmichael's tea table. Maps, letters, official documents with territorial seals. "Miss Morrow, how would you feel about establishing a demonstration school?" Sarah leaned forward. "What kind of demonstration?" "The commission is selecting 12 educators to pioneer new teaching methods. Equal instruction, regardless of gender. Practical sciences integrated with traditional subjects. Students learning by doing, not just memorizing." Cole pointed to a map showing small towns scattered across Dakota Territory. "Each demonstration school serves as a model for surrounding communities, and if the communities object, the schools operate under territorial authority. Local school boards cannot interfere." Mrs. Carmichael had been listening from the doorway. Now she stepped into the parlor. "Where would such a school be established?" Cole turned the map toward them. "That depends on Miss Morrow's preference. We have authorization for sites in 12 communities, some larger than Millbrook, some smaller. All need teachers willing to challenge conventional methods." Sarah opened her ledger and ran her finger down today's entries. 17 names. 17 children whose education had been curtailed because their parents feared knowledge. What would stop the same thing from happening again? Territorial backing, legal protection, and careful selection of communities. Cole gathered the papers back into his folder. "Miss Morrow, we're not asking you to fight the same battle in a different town. We're asking you to demonstrate that there's a better way to prepare children for the 20th century." The clock on Mrs. Carmichael's mantelpiece chimed 9 times. Through the window, Sarah could see the strangers' wagons still waiting in the street. The mules stood patient in their harness, as if accustomed to long waits while their owner conducted important business. "I need time to consider this." "Of course, but not too much time." Cole stood and adjusted his satchel strap. "The commission meets Friday to assign the final positions. I can hold your application until then, but after Friday the opportunity passes to someone else." After he left, Sarah sat in the quiet parlor with the ledger open on her knees. Mrs. Carmichael brought fresh tea and settled back into her rocking chair. "Sounds too good to be true," the older woman said. "Or too true to pass up," Sarah wrote in the ledger. "The 15th of March, evening. Unexpected opportunity. Teaching without boundaries. Territorial protection. Decision required by Friday. Outside, the stranger's wagon rolled away into the darkness, carrying with it the possibility of starting over. Sarah closed the ledger and held it against her chest, feeling the weight of 3 years' worth of careful observations and recorded hopes. Friday was 3 days away. The school bell struck 8 times on Friday morning, its bronze voice carrying across Millbrook's awakening streets. Sarah stood in the empty schoolhouse, her packed belongings arranged on the desk beside the ledger. Through the windows, she could see unusual activity in the market square, more wagons than Tuesday typically brought, more people gathered around the central scale. Nathan Cole's black freight wagon sat at the square's edge. He'd returned Thursday evening with contracts and legal documents, giving her until this morning to decide. The territorial position waited, along with a new school in a town called Cedar Falls, 60 miles west. A place where she could teach without interference, where children could learn without artificial boundaries. But first, she had business to finish in Millbrook. The market square buzzed with more than commerce when Sarah approached at 9 o'clock. Word had spread about yesterday's confrontation with Jonas Polk over the scales. Farmers stood in clusters, discussing weights and measures. Several had brought their own scales, comparing them against the official market standard. Sarah carried the ledger openly now, not hiding her purpose. Mrs. Davidson stood near Polk's grain wagon, this time with her husband beside her. Other women had gathered too, Mrs. Fletcher, Mrs. Bradley, mothers whose children had sat empty benches this week, Miss Morrow. Mrs. Fletcher approached with hesitant steps. "Is it true you're leaving today?" "It's true. Mary's been asking for you, wondering about that soil lesson you started." Sarah opened the ledger and withdrew a folded paper. I wrote down the key points. Crop rotation, mineral depletion, natural fertilizers. Everything she needs to help her father improve their yields. Mrs. Fletcher took the paper like it might burn her fingers. Tom Fletcher won't appreciate his daughter telling him how to farm. Then she shouldn't tell him. She should show him. Plant a test plot using the methods I described. Let the results speak for themselves. More women gathered around them. Mrs. Bradley, Mrs. Henley, even Mrs. Whitman, the school board chairman's wife. They formed a loose circle around Sarah, their market baskets forgotten. "You really think girls should learn the same as boys?" Mrs. Bradley asked. Sarah looked toward the market scale where Jonas Polk was weighing flour for another customer. The brass plates tipped unevenly again, shortchanging the buyer. "I think everyone should learn to recognize when they're being cheated." She walked to the scale with the women following. Polk saw them coming and his jaw tightened. "Mr. Polk, would you mind if I demonstrated something? I got customers waiting. This will only take a moment." Sarah set her ledger down and pointed to the scale. "Ladies, watch the brass plates when he weighs the next order." Mrs. Patterson stepped forward with an order for 10 pounds of cornmeal. Polk measured it quickly, but Sarah could see the familiar tilt that indicated short weight. "Stop there," Sarah said. "Mrs. Patterson, look at the balance arm. See how it doesn't sit level?" The gathered women leaned closer, studying the scale like students examining a difficult lesson. Mrs. Patterson frowned at the tilted plates. "Add more meal until it balances true," Sarah instructed. Polk's face darkened. "This is interference with legal commerce. This is education." Sarah touched the scale's brass arm, showing how it should sit level. "Every woman here buys from this scale. Each of you deserves honest weight for honest money." Ezra Whitman pushed through the crowd, his face red with anger. "Miss Morrow, you got no authority here. Your employment ended this morning. My employment ended. My responsibility to this community continues until I leave it." Sarah opened the ledger and withdrew another folded paper. "I've documented 13 instances of short weights at this scale over the past 3 days. Names, dates, amounts." Mrs. Patterson just experienced the 14th. The crowd murmured, women turning to each other with growing understanding. Mrs. Henley spoke up. "I wondered why my flour didn't stretch as far as it used to." "The territorial inspector needs to see these records," Mrs. Davidson added. Whitman stepped closer to Sarah, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "You're making enemies, Miss Morrow. Powerful enemies." "I'm making teachers." Sarah looked around the circle of women. "Every person here now knows how to read a scale. Knowledge doesn't require my presence to survive. Nathan Cole appeared at the crowd's edge, his official satchel in hand. He'd been watching from his wagon, waiting for this moment. "Ladies and gentlemen," he announced, his voice carrying across the square, "I represent the Dakota Territorial Education Commission. Miss Morrow is correct about her responsibilities. Education serves the community, not just the school board." He opened his satchel and withdrew an official document. "Furthermore, I have here a territorial warrant authorizing investigation of commercial fraud. These scale irregularities constitute exactly such fraud." Polk's face went pale. Whitman stepped back, his authority suddenly uncertain. Cole walked to Sarah and extended his hand. "Miss Morrow, if you're ready, Cedar Falls awaits. Your new school opens Monday morning." Sarah closed the ledger and tucked it under her arm. Around her, the women of Millbrook stood straighter, their eyes bright with new understanding. They'd learned to read more than scales. Today, they'd learned to read their own power. "I'm ready." She looked back at the faces surrounding her. "Remember what you learned here. Teach it to your daughters. Knowledge belongs to anyone brave enough to claim it." As Cole's wagon rolled west toward Cedar Falls, Sarah opened the ledger to a fresh page and wrote, "The 18th of March, 1890. Final lesson delivered. Audience, entire community. Subject, weights, measures, and the courage to demand fairness. Reception, transformational." The market square fell behind them, but the school bell's bronze voice followed for nearly a mile, as if the town itself was calling out a farewell to the teacher who had shown them that education could happen anywhere, even in the space between honest scales and honest hearts. Cedar Falls welcomed Sarah with a one-room schoolhouse that smelled of fresh pine lumber and a town square where the market scale sat level and true. On Monday morning, 18 children filled the benches, 9 boys, 9 girls, all eager for lessons that made no distinction between masculine and feminine knowledge. Sarah opened her ledger to the first page of a new chapter and wrote, "The 21st of March, 1890, Day 1, Cedar Falls Demonstration School. Equal minds deserve equal opportunities. The path ahead is clear." Outside the window, the morning light fell across her desk with the promise of countless lessons yet to be taught and infinite paths yet to be cleared. If something in this story touched you, linger with us. We'll handle the rest.